Hi, I'm Jeremiah. Welcome to Up at Night. This podcast is all about learning from thought leaders, academics, and professionals based on one fundamental question. What keeps you up at night? Welcome to Up at Night. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Natalia Kaplan. Natalia is an amazing human being that I've had the chance to meet at an event organized by Shopify, Up Night, which was really awesome. And I wanted to invite Natalia because I think she really have a different and great story about how an entrepreneur end up being in charge of an agency. So Natalia, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for inviting me. It was up nights actually, now that I think about it. I was trying to remember where we met, but yeah, small world.
It is a small world. I think we also have friends in common.
Yeah.
And so the first question I want to jump right into is, tell me a bit about the character. Who are you? What brought you to eventually become an entrepreneur? And where did all that start?
Ooh, it's funny you say character because I think that's exactly what I feel like sometimes, I think being the 90s kid, I played a lot of Sims, simulation games where you build up. And sometimes I have to think about myself like a sim where I'm like, am I social enough? Has my bar for food gone up? And kind of, I am a character in my own life sometimes. But my background is pretty varied and unusual. I actually have a background in psychology. I did research for a couple of years. I did a master's of accounting thinking that that would be really cool because I already know math. Finding out that accounting's not that fun. Accountants don't come after me, please.
But practical, though.
Quite practical. That was exactly why I did the degree. I was like, no one gets fired if they're an accountant. That's the last person who gets fired if a company goes under. I never want to be fired. Great idea. Let's go into accounting. Like that was the logic in young Nat. And during that time, I got really, and I'm trying to avoid the word lucky because that's, it says that I don't have agency and I don't have action. So I want to say I was fortunate to meet the people at L'Oreal who then offered me a position in marketing because I clearly was not a good fit with accounting. So my start in the accounting or marketing world, not accounting world, but my start in the marketing world was an unusual, I want to say serpentine wave of getting to there where I gathered all these experiences that kind of led me to understand how business functions from a consumer perspective, but also from a human psychology perspective, why we buy things the way we do, why we're attracted to a certain product versus another. So that kind of was my journey into the marketing world. During the pandemic, I burnt out like a lot of us did. My significant other bribed me to get a dog. I've always wanted to have a dog. So he bribed me with getting a cottage. He said, this woman who has an accounting background would not spend all her life savings to get a dog. So we'll get a dog if we buy a cottage. And I was like, take my money. I have no reasoning skills whatsoever. So we got this cottage, we got this dog. I burnt out. So I took time off to try to heal, to try to take time to restock on what's important in life. And during that time period, all these people in my life that I've networked with reached out saying, I heard that you're not working anymore. Would you take a look at this project? Would you look at this? Would you do this for me? And my answer, and I believe we're allowed to swear, so I was going to say is, fuck off. No, I'm taking time off to heal. I don't want to work on your project. That sounds terrible. And then as happens to many of us is a couple of months into it, I realized I actually needed money to eat. So I called those people back up when I said, I didn't say fuck off. I meant fuck off. That sounds so exciting. Let me definitely take that project on. So I started taking these projects on just for extra cash, just to keep myself occupied. And one project turned into another, which turned into three, which then suddenly I had to bring someone else in to help me with. And a few months down the line, I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is a thing I could do. And that's the origin story of my agency, is how I got into this.
That's pretty cool. I want to go back to one thing you're saying that I find quite interesting, because in my humble opinion, the whole marketing world is born out of a need to better understand and especially communicate with consumers. And it falls down into psychology, in my opinion, right?
Yes.
The better you are at understanding the consumer, or the audience you want to convey a message towards to, the better you are in terms of efficiency, in terms
Yeah.
of quality of communication, in terms of capacity to reach the customer the right way. So I'm curious to know where you at some point realized in your life, oh, I love psychology. Accounting is quite practical, and now probably more than ever since you have your own business. But where in your mind did that shift happen, and you said, oh, you know what, marketing would be cool?
Ooh, um, I I think quite honestly, because my background has always been in psychology and research, and I come from a family of all doctors.
Okay.
I'm now my sister is not a doctor either, but everyone else in my family is doctors. So I never had that exposure to business. I never had that exposure to other jobs. Uh, and I'll say this like terrible anecdote, but when I had told my mother in the beginning of my university career and whatnot, there are other jobs aside from doctors, and she said, yeah, someone has to flip the hamburgers for the doctors. So that was like my whole world, which
Okay.
like maybe we'll cut that, but we'll see. We'll see on the roll
No, no, no,
afterwards.
no. That's fine. That's fair.
But there I was so limited in terms of scope of what kind of careers are there, what is an opportunity for someone like myself who, does have a research background, does have some science, does have some math, but who really deep down inside was really into creative sphere and was an artist. So I really wish I had a more generic degree almost where I had the opportunity to see other classes and whatnot. But I think I was just the HR at L'Oreal at the time, like, really had a vision of understanding my personality and my skills, and the interview we did was very unusual. It was a group interview where they played games. So it was an opportunity to kind of showcase myself, and because I was so out of left field where I thought I was interviewing for accounting and it was for a marketing group interview, that I didn't put that pressure on myself either. So I had that opportunity to play and just lean into my psychology background, and they saw that, and they saw that link to marketing, and they were able to just tell me, you should do this, come do a marketing internship with us, and then gave me the tools to go and learn that, and allowed me to kind of make those connections. So I think right off the bat, I realized and I could see, like, oh, marketing is really that beautiful merging of science, of math, of art, of human connections, really all put together. So it was right off that bat of making that connection all the time.
I strongly believe that we're heavily influenced by our parents, one, the five closest people closest to us. And I'm really happy you share that with the audience, because deep down, you could probably have become an amazing doctor or work in health and wellness as a
Mhm.
career. But there was something inside of you that was not fulfilled, and that was your creativity. And you listened to it and you tried to explore and let that out in order to find something that is still a great job but resonate with you better. And I would like to ask you, because there's probably a lot of people listening to that right now who ask themselves, oh, I could be this or I could be that, because they're heavily influenced by their entourage. What would you tell them as an advice, and also potentially as a mistake that you did going through that process?
Ooh. As advice, I still, I think to this day, still struggle, still have this back and forth about, am I being fulfilled? And leaning back on my psychology background, there is a great psychologist named Maslow, that you may or may not have heard, but his theory is this idea of the Maslow pyramid, where on
Mm,
the bottom of the pyramid is your basic needs such as food, shelter, safety. On the next level of the pyramid, there's another level of need that needs to be fulfilled, which is like your family and friends around you, that you're social, that you're engaging. And as you climb up that pyramid, you go up to this intrinsic, or not intrinsic, but this need of psychological fulfillment or philosophical fulfillment as you climb up, as you fulfill your bottom row. And I think about this often coming as an immigrant, coming from families who have gone through very, very challenging, traumatic things. From my grandfather had been in the Holocaust. My parents went through the Cold War. So we've gone through a lot of different challenges. And I question myself all the time when I'm like, I'm not being fulfilled. You sit at your computer, you're like, I don't feel super fulfilled. It's like, is that a legitimate psychological need, or am I so fulfilled that I have to create this problem in my head of like my job not being fulfilling enough? Like I just, there's moments that I think about that often. So inside of me, there's always this battle of like, am I fulfilled enough, or should I be happy that I could bring food home to my family, that I could have a shelter, that all those things that my family struggled so hard over generations to do, that I could easily do today. So I think it's a very interesting question, especially especially as someone who has a creative side. And I think that's a very common struggle, challenge for a young artist of like, how do I have a fulfilling career, but how do I also am able to provide for myself, and how do I
Pay
stay
for the
true to
bills.
my
Yeah.
vision?
Yeah.
Pay for the bills, be able to go to the dentist, be able to go on vacation, like all those things that you want to do. So I think in this journey is that there are so many new ways to make money, first of all, and be able to pay the bills in a way that I think is so surprising to us, like us in our 30s and 40s now, where we didn't have that option younger. Like YouTube was just a new thing. Like I remember when Facebook came around, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, why would I waste my time? And now people are making tons of money off of it. So I think there's always opportunity, that if this truly is your calling, your deep passion, that you think about this all the time and that's all you want to do, you'll find a way to make money on it. And there's so many resources out there, especially, for example, in Montreal. I'll shout out Yes Montreal, which is an organization that supports young unemployed and unemployed youth, but also entrepreneurs and artists as well. And they're there to help support and guide you in how to make money. But there's so many organizations out there that want to support people who are trying to do art or trying to fulfill and be an entrepreneur. So I think there's opportunities that if it's deeply your passion, you should do it. You should find a way to make it happen if you're in the position, obviously, if you have the privilege to do it. And then two, and this is the one that I've kind of come to where I'm feeling comfortable with, which is, you don't have to do it 100% either. Like if you are deeply passionate and you want to be fulfilled and do something, you could also do it one day a week. Like for example, today I actually took off a day to go to my art school to be able to go do art all day. So I think there's a way to make space to be able to still have that fulfillment and still be able to pursue what you're passionate about and still do other things on the side. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing commitment either. Is my
Yeah.
feeling around it.
You're so right. Because, I say it as a joke. I would love to be a full-time streamer. I'm terrible. I'm too old for this. And I could not sustain the lifestyle I have if I were to spend 12 hours on Twitch every day. So, you're absolutely right on that end. You started your own business because you burned out. And this is unfortunately a story we hear often. It's a great story in your case because On Point Agencies is doing great. You've built something amazing, in my opinion, and I want to talk about that later. But tell me about your mental state when you were going through that burnout and how you were able to transform that into a source of motivation that is strong enough or valuable enough for you to decide to change that, do a 360, a 180, I should say, and really tell yourself, you know what? Yes, I need to pay my bill, but I'm competent, I'm good at this, and I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah. I there's a statistic out there that someone had said that once you've experienced burnout, you're 6 times more likely to experience burnout. So it's something that has like kind of stuck in my mind as well. And I think all of us are very aware of it in some ways, like even in the back of the head. And I think it doesn't help that the pandemic has left us in some ways more fragile. Like I feel like all of us have a little bit more of goldfish brain where we forget things. Like I've got sticky notes all over, like a little more tired. So I think there's this compilation of effects that had come together. But when I remember a long time ago, I had a boss once that quit in the middle, or it also took a sabbatical actually, long before the pandemic. But she had left, and I was so shocked. You're doing amazing. You're brilliant. Why would you leave? And she said that she was leaving because she was no longer good for the team, that she was bringing down the team. And I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Like, are you crazy? Like, why would you do that? And then that that memory like surfaced to me in around December 2020, beginning of 2021. That memory surfaced, and I realized how much that the team I had at the job I was at that point, how much they had been picking up my slack because I was so burnt out that I was not doing my work anymore. And because I had such an empathetic team, that I had such wonderful people around me, they were willing to do that for me to keep me, still floating. But realizing how much pressure I'd put on them because of that as well. Like, they were now not only doing their own job, but they were doing my job and tiptoeing around it. Like, no one wanted to tell me. So I realized it wasn't even, that was what allowed me to let go. Really, it wasn't just me anymore. Because if it was me, I would have probably dragged my like corpse through my job and still like clocked in, clocked out. But knowing that there was someone else impacted by it really upset me and gave me that push to leave and take that break. And it was a really, really hard transition. We bought that cottage. So I was lying in the cottage. My partner brought out our mattress in our living room so I could lie there. And I just lay there looking out the window for a month. I couldn't look at TV. I couldn't read. I just was like zombie-like, just watching out the window, just dead. My body was done with it.
It's a pretty painful experience. And I hope everybody who listens to this will understand that there's a limit to an extent of how far we can push emotionally and mentally that machine we're using in our day-to-day in our work. And there's a lot of emotional stress. You probably had a big corporate job, you were busy, and there's a lot of pressure. Tell me, because I'm pretty sure you're under a lot of pressure too now that you have your business. But from what I see, from what I saw on your website, from what I see from you, you also seems to have built a company that is much closer to your values and what you cherish. Does that make a big difference?
Yes, it definitely makes a difference in motivation factor, where it doesn't feel like someone gave you arbitrary rules and now you have to just go do and fulfill those rules. Now you could actually make a decision. And that was really when I started thinking about, oh, this could be an agency. I could do this full time. That was the moment where I realized I could choose the projects I take on. I could choose who we work with and why and what we do. And it's not to say there weren't moments, in the last 4 years where I didn't take a client. Like, I took a client that I didn't necessarily want to or necessarily totally aligned. But there are moments where I have that power of decision, however arbitrary it could be and feels kind of random. But I think it makes a huge difference in motivation factor, in interest also, and sustaining that interest. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people with type A personality will have a very similar experience where they easily get bored, where we're always trying to get that next milestone, that next high, that next project, that next whatever, where we're so driven that it's easy to lose that sustenance and that actual momentum. So I think running my own agency allowed me to kind of find new goals, new motivation. Whereas at my other previous jobs, like, the only way that was sustained is through multiple promotions. That would be the only way that I could like keep going, would be like next promotion, next promotion, next promotion. Gotta keep chugging and learning. So having my own agency where my values are aligned, where I could choose new projects, new challenges, help keep me just keep driven and keep going as well, and motivated.
Do you think a common mistake we do, especially when we're young, we want to build our career, we jump into a rat race and we run after promotions and who's the biggest company we work for? Um, Sitting back now, reflecting upon that, I'm wondering, is it the right way to do it? And is it a painful, necessary step? Or do you think we should be more cautious and choose a company, not just for the salary, but for the value the company have? And I think more importantly also, who's our direct report, who's our manager, because that's the person we're going to learn from, right?
Absolutely. I So I when I speak with students in particular, I often say, and you could disagree with me obviously, but I often say that, especially if you're in a service field where what you're producing is for other clients. So for example, graphic designers or marketers or whatever it is, and you're not selling a product, it's so important to have corporate experience. Like that experience that I got, in particular in L'Oreal, had shaped me in ways that some days I'll wake up and I'll remember something and be like, oh my God, if I'm so glad I had that experience, whether or not it was positive or negative, and it's everything from, learning how to just present a deck all the way to how do I present myself as a person. Like there was a lot of painful lessons where me, the rebellious, like pierced up, like tattooed person, I had a blue mohawk at L'Oreal. Like I totally didn't fit in the mold of them. But there's so many lessons that I learned where those moments of like combativeness where later on I could look like, at the moment I couldn't accept those lessons, but later on 3, 6, 9 years down the line, I look back and I'm like, man, I'm so glad that happened because I understand now, like from a corporate perspective, like why this functions and this doesn't work, or in the hierarchies and the systems in place. So I think my setup, as challenging as it was, and it was, L'Oreal is notorious for its incredibly um, rigorous environment and fast-paced environment. I think it allowed me to know how to run my organization in a way that I could actually speak that corporate lingo, where I could go to other corporations and be like, listen, like, let's talk to your GM, let's talk to your CFO here. Like, I understand the process is needed to get that contract, to get that work. So I think in a service industry, as much as someone might not want to, they really should have that corporate experience of understanding how the sausage is made on the back end, really.
Yep.
I do think there's a huge cultural shift, though, where younger and younger generations want to have meaning in their jobs, which is not a bad thing, and they want to work with an organization that aligns with their values, which also isn't necessarily a bad thing. I do think it's a wake-up call for corporations who want to maintain their workforce, that they need to align. Like Patagonia has been doing amazing for years anyways, but I think their applications are like 4,000 to 1 for one job because people so truly believe in their mission statements, what they do and how they do it. And you had said something about direct mentorship, which I think is so important, of the people you surround yourself, because you can work at, like, take the evilest corporation in the world, but as long as the people on your team care for you,
Yeah.
work with you, it could still be meaningful work. Like you could still be making change from the inside as well. And I think that's important to recognize, that regardless where you go, whether it's corporate or nonprofit or whatever, you could be and you can do meaningful change where you're at, and do good, if unless you don't want to do good. But like you could do good wherever you are and find that change. But I do think that all of us, small business, large businesses, need to start thinking about how value is what's going to drive business at the end of the day as well.
We're a value creator. Ultimately, if we don't bring value, we're not going to be there tomorrow. You're absolutely right. You started On Point, which is your agency. What was the hardest lesson working on your business you've learned throughout the years?
Oh, there's been a lot of, like, very big believer of like the school of hard knocks. I think, I often joke with my friends on the side that I'm just like an overgrown teenager still. Like there's moments where I'm like, I can't believe I'm still an adult. And that's fine in a personal life, but it's an attitude that has really kind of hindered me in my agency life in some ways. Um, and I'm like you've met me before in other settings, but what I am in person and as in my personal life is pretty much where you get me in business. Like I don't really filter one from the other, and that's part of my values of like that transparency and honesty and just not wanting to masquerade anymore. But that jokey, like, oh, I'm looking for an adulty adult, translated in some ways to me giving up my control of my agency to my employees, to a potential partner, and kind of losing control of the business. And it took me a good solid year and a half to recognize that that was happening, and that I was slowly losing control, and that, the businesses that were coming in were not the right fits, that the work that was coming in was no longer aligned with what I wanted to do, and kind of having to put the brakes and stop and backtrack and then take back control and trying to now wrestle, like it's been, I want to say like 8 months since that result of like recognizing that I had lost control of my own agency. So taking back that control and working it back is a very momentous, like challenging work of like trying to put all the pieces together, being like, okay, so I haven't worked on this. I've given this to person A. I gotta take a look back. Is this aligned still? Is the strategy right? Is it correct? So that's probably one of the biggest lessons I had unfortunately learned in the last couple of years as well.
For someone who starts his own business, based on your experience, how important it is to choose the people around you and have them align with the corporate values you're trying to build?
Ooh. So I like building teams, and I've built a couple of teams before in my corporate jobs. I think, and I fight, and this is an interesting conversation on a total side note of like, how much is the business you versus how much is it a separate entity with its own values? And I often fight on this point as well in terms of like, as silly as like brand colors, where I'm like, these are good, but they're not my favorite colors, but should it be my favorite color? So I often think about this. So when I think about values of a team and how I build my team, this is where it gets very muddy, because really the team is working with me. Like I have to work with these people on a daily basis. Yes, they have to hopefully match the values of the company, but they actually need to get along with me. And in some ways, like the metaphor I use often when I'm building teams, and in no way do I mean to sound patronizing about it, but I often say like being a manager is like being a babysitter. Like, are my kids doing their homework? Are my kids playing well with other kids? Are my kids being nice to other authority figures? Like, it's really about like managing dynamics together and training them up to replace me, to go on in other jobs, etc. So building my own team, I thought I had the skill sets to do it because I've built other great teams that have gone and done fantastic things. So why wouldn't I know how to build my own team on my own agency with my own values? Of course. But it is so different to hire for your own company than it is for like a role, because one, you're fully responsible. So when like shit hits the fan, they're like, why the hell is there like 50 cents less on my paycheck? You're like, oh, that's me. Oh my God. I got to go look at that. Or just taking that onus of this is the direction we're going. You can't just be like, the CEO said we have to go in that direction now. Like, sorry, everyone, 90 degrees, give up everything you've worked on for the last 3 months. It's you. It's also you. So you're taking on this dual kind of role where you're both managing and you're leading. So there's a lot of these moving pieces. And then there's a huge shift in relationship where before there was camaraderie, where there is a sense of like, we're on the same team and other people around us, we're building our team up and we're fighting up in our ranks, whatever it is. Now there's a huge separation between me because I pay them and also manage them on the side, that I had a really hard time going over and trying to figure out and understand that dynamic relationship. But I think for me, whenever I build a team, the number one criteria is, and I say this on all my interviews, I say this when I meet people, which is, I want you to be curious. Like, forget every other aspect of the job and whatnot. If you're not curious, you're not a right fit to be on my team. And by curious, I mean like, if you see the numbers for the day, whatever it is, and you see a spike, I want you to inherently be like, why? And go dig in. That's what I want you to do. I don't want it to come from me. So this is like, I had an employee who was my sister, actually. My sister worked with me for a little while, but she said, and I'm going to poop on her, but she's actually a brilliant marketer and has a master's degree in data analytics and marketing. So, but this is like a long time ago. But she had once said, why would I waste my time searching the answers if I could just go ask you to tell me? And it blew my mind that there was such a huge generation gap that was the mindset. She's like, that's what I was taught in school, is like, why would I spend valuable time doing this when I could ask? And it took me a long time to kind of learn how to change that dynamic and change that language. But I tell that whenever I interview people is, I need you to be the one who actually asks the questions, like, because I won't always be there and I shouldn't always be there to ask those for you. So I need you to go and dig and research as well.
What would you say to these influencers we see on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, that tells these young entrepreneur, hey, get this course, listen to my 7-minute video, and I'm going to tell you how to build a successful 9-figure agency in the next 6 months?
Honestly, I see those, and sometimes I'm like this close to being like, okay, subscribe, like, but I think I'm inherently very like super suspicious by nature. So I've had like not even these influencers, but like even like business coaches, or I'm sure you've seen those like whatever $7 million class like workshops or whatever, where they're trying to sell you on these things. And I think like that's where like my natural suspicion comes in. I'm like, but you don't even know what I do. I could be selling like poop pictures where I paint with my poop, and you think I'm gonna make 7 million? Like, get out of here. You have no idea what my business is. So I think like that's my natural first inclination wherever. So like be naturally suspicious, guys, like always, especially when it comes to your money and time. Like don't hand off. But I think that also the other side of it is if they were really making that much money, they're not going to be slinging you this product. They're going to be retired at Bali. Like why would they be wasting their time giving you this workshop if they're making that much money? So I think that's my natural suspicion coming through. I think there's always something you could learn, and like I've audited some of those like those courses from all those coaches and business coaches, and you could still pull some interesting pieces, as small as it might be. Like I spent a whole day at this one class trying to sell me on their next $1 million project, whatever it is, and they had an amazing formula for calculating how much money you needed to make and how to backwards calculate, like, oh, if you're trying to reach X amount of dollars, whatever it was, like if you're trying to reach the next million, here's how you figure out how many clients you need to get then to achieve it. And it was such a simple formula that even me with my accounting background, I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like what a great piece of information. So I think there's always value in whatever you do. I don't think you should like dump money into it right away, but I think you could always find something and get something interesting out of it, whether it's a connection with someone, a network opportunity, or whatever it is. So be naturally suspicious, and then if you're already in it, like see what you could get from it. Like get your money's worth, get your time's worth, like find something information that's new from it.
I like the fact that you mentioned to the people around you that they have to be and stay creative and curious. I think curiosity feeds creativity, and one goes in hand with the other. Now, like any creative person, sometimes it just doesn't work. How do you manage to go through that? And did you experience this already? And how did you went through? Because it must be so stressful. You have deliverable, you have things to produce. How did you went through that?
Well, creativity is like, I think creativity is both an inherent talent and it's also a skill that you could work on. And I truly believe the two go hand in hand. I think creativity is almost like a muscle. Like you do have to work it out, but you could also exhaust it. And I think a lot of creatives often struggle with trying to produce, especially for a client where you're not being creative for, your soul's not singing or whatever you want to call it, but they have to produce because their client demanded it. And it could be the most terrible brief, whatever it is, and you just have to do it. I think to stay creative, and I strongly believe in this, is one, you have to have boredom. And I think that is the number one problem and challenge that I think artists, creatives, whatever it is, struggle in 2025, is that we are never bored. We are never allowed to be bored. We're always with our phones. Like you go to the dentist, you've got your phone. You go into the bathroom, you've got your phone. You never allow your mind to wander. And I think that is a number one killer for creativity. You have to be away from constant stimulation to let your brain kind of relax and kind of start producing on its own and bringing out these ideas on its own. So I think finding a means of being bored, whether that's go for a jog without your headphones, like find a moment to be bored. I think there's an element of you have to step away and do something else as well. Like it's not something you can keep bashing your head in. Like if you're supposed to design a new website and it's just not looking great, don't put another 3 hours into it. Step away and go do something else. Like go go for a walk, go take a snack, go call someone, but do something different. And I think allowing your brain to shift gears and look at something different helps, because the more you work it, the worse it gets. And then I think there is an element of doing different things. And that's like so vague, but like different art forms is the best way I would describe it. So if you are a painter, for example, I think the best way to bring out your painting creativity is to go do a ceramics class, for example, or do a dance class, whatever it is. But engage yourself in new activities to help stimulate those ideas. I think, and this is my own, I guess, like trap, is that often I'll justify being on social media saying like, oh, I'm trying to get new ideas to be creative with. And it's just a trap. Like, I have never once did any of the projects that I've seen online where I'm like, this is so cool, I can't wait to try this. Never in like my whole time on social media. So
I like this advice. And Natalia, what keeps you up at night?
I mean, aside from like the political climate that we have entered right now,
Fair enough.
yeah, I think what keeps me up at night is really, I've in some ways became an entrepreneur without it being a life plan for me. I came into it through a lot of series of opportunities and fortunate meetings. What keeps me up at night is, what is Natalia 3.0? What is the next iteration? Is my agency gets massive and takes over the world? Is it I sell my agency? Is it I shutter? I feel like sometimes I myself haven't figured out those next steps yet. And I sometimes feel like a cartoon character where like my feet are like way ahead of the rest of my body and I'm trying to keep up with it. So that's what keeps me at night, is I'm not sure what the next version of me, the next version of my work, the next thing that I create is. But I think I'm kind of excited, if not just a little bit nervous too.
I'm pretty confident whatever you decide to do, it's gonna be great. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me and the audience today. I really do appreciate. For those who would like to see your work and your agency, they can visit onpointagency.com, if I'm correct.
.ca. We are Canadian proud. It's .ca.
.ca. And you're also on LinkedIn. If people want to reach out to you, LinkedIn is LinkedIn the best platform, or there's other platform?
LinkedIn is probably the best one. It's the one I obsessively change or check. Or Instagram, On Point Agency Inc.
Thank you so much for being with me today, Natalia, and I wish you the best going forward with your future endeavor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being part of the Up at Night family. If you've liked what you heard today, don't forget to rate, follow, subscribe, or leave me a comment below. New episodes of Up at Night drop every week. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single episode. I'm Jeremiah Curvers. Until next time.